before we get started, this particular event is a panel discussion on mental health and women. And so the main objective of this panel discussion is to obtain an understanding of what factors influence women's mental health, current issues that we need to be aware of, and how to address mental health among women. And lastly, which is the most important part too, is be able to learn resources that women can use for support. And so I'll be the moderator for this panel discussion, and we're joined by our wonderful and amazing panelists. Peyton Jones. Peyton is the founder and executive director of Crowned by Divinity. And their focus is to help women find restoration through outreach, mentorship, meaningful connections, and programs that produce healing. She's also an advocate for those who have lived life feeling unheard and insignificant. By helping them to recognize their strengths and discover their passions, her goal is to lead them to live a life of purpose and ignite their voice. Our next panelist is Mumsy Lidimani. Mumsy has a master's degree in forensic psychology and started her own business, which is called Lidimani Forensic Psychologists and Associates, which is in South Africa. She is a member of the appointment committee of the Broadcasting Complaints Commissions of South Africa, a member of the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, and lastly, a member of the Chicago School of Professional Psychology Alumni Council. Our next panelist is Dominic Lloyd. Dominic works as a mental health technician at a residential inpatient treatment center for adolescents, as well as an independent therapist contractor at Silmar Rehabilitation Center. In addition, she's completing her internship at a private practice administering psychological testing while being supervised by a licensed clinical forensic psychologist and also providing school-based psychotherapy to adolescents in a high school setting. She's also the founder of the Teleology Project, inspired by the events of COVID, and understood the needs of unhoused individuals unable to obtain important resources with the world being shut down. And last but not the least, Jocelyn Ibarra. Jocelyn is currently a psychiatric social worker. They are a first-generation Latinx MSW graduate with a demonstrated history of working in the mental health care industry. Jocelyn's main focus of studies has been critical race theory with an emphasis on intersectionality, and their practice focus has been based on restorative justice for marginalized communities. So, to get things started, because we are talking about mental health and women, why is it important to learn about and address issues surrounding women's mental health?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Why is it important to learn about and address issues surrounding women's mental
health? I believe it's important because as women, we can't allow other genders or either other parties really speak on things that we are going through. I think it's very important that we have people that look like us and go through the issues that we go through, address the issues that we understand. For instance, like if we're going through PMDD, I don't expect, a therapist or even a doctor, right? If a medical doctor to understand the different issues that we are going through those times if they don't know what our bodies are physically going through on a day-to-day basis or on a week-to-week basis. I think it's important that we learn these things and that other women understand that these things are available to have people that look like you that want to help you.
Hi, Lee. Yes, I think it's important because as women, we carry a lot of responsibilities. We raise children, we work, 9-to-5 jobs, some of us, and it's very important to learn to take care of ourselves. It's not healthy, obviously, to keep chasing the clock, making sure that, breakfast, lunch, and dinner is prepared, taking care of the kids so they can be at school on time. It's really, really important to make sure we take care of ourselves because if you don't, we're going to end up either depressed or even hitting a mental health breakdown. So we, as women, we have a lot on our shoulders. So it's very important to teach women to take care of their mental health.
To kind of go off that, like women do compartmentalize, I feel, a lot of their lives when playing a lot of these roles. And, mental health is something that I think society has, until recently, kind of told us to put on the back burner. So emphasizing the importance of mental health for women now more than ever, so that we don't have burnout or we don't necessarily just kind of go on with our mental health issues, is a really big significance there while we're working through our whole lives of being either a caretaker or somebody who works at a different job and other things like that.
Hayden, did you want to add something?
So I think that mental illness it's so real and it's so important to be aware of and treat. I know what it's like to live a life with mental illness and go untreated. And I've struggled with mental illness for years and years. And for the longest time, it went untreated because I didn't know how to get help. And it was just so costly. And I know that living a life going untreated with mental health, it's a gamble. It's a gamble of your life. Like I spent years and years struggling with an eating disorder, struggling with self-harm, struggling with suicide ideations, and I struggled with it every single day. And I ended up attempting suicide. I ended up getting airlifted, getting put in ICU, and almost dying. And that was because it went untreated. And mental health, you know, just like it is just now kind of being talked about a lot more than it used to be. You know, there wasn't a lot of awareness a couple of years ago, even. You know, when I first started struggling years and years and years ago, like it was not talked about at all. Like I didn't think that other people struggled with it. Like I was on a search to find other girls and women who struggled with it. Like I would search online on social media accounts and on like Tumblr and like see like, is anyone else struggling, you know? And I would idolize certain artists and celebrities who was open about the struggle with it, because I was like, I feel so alone. I don't know how to do this. Like, and the biggest thing is it's just not talked about as much as it should be. And it's just we go untreated so often, and that's why there's so many suicides. Like the rate of suicides is so high, and it's because it goes untalked about and untreated. And I just think that it is just so important to raise awareness with.
Definitely. And, you know, what everyone said, it's not only talking about women's mental health, but mental health in general is very important to be talked about, because, you know, it is still stigmatized, maybe not as it was before, but, you know, that we're still far from having mental health as a very acceptable, non-stigmatized, non-taboo subject. And this is why we're doing these awareness events, you know, it starts with educating people, and it snowballs from there. So I think it also goes into this, you know, why, yeah, we're talking about the importance of mental health and learning about women's mental health. But why do you think it's important that women's mental health issues be addressed separately?
I think that women experience different barriers than males do. And I think especially minority women will experience completely different additional barriers than like a white male would. And I think it's important to consider those barriers, such as they're going to experience different barriers regarding getting treatment for mental illness, or maybe more likely to experience poverty after death of a spouse. So I think it is really important to consider and take into consideration those things, because they do create additional barriers and in society and just overall for women and minorities and the LGBTQ community and just a lot of different groups.
I think because of our biological composition, you know, women are known to be hormonal beings. I mean, that's what they say when they refer to us, which is very wrong, because when you want to raise your voice and tell someone, either a colleague, maybe a male colleague, and say, today I'm having a bad day. Sometimes it's, you get a response like you're probably just being hormonal, or maybe you're PMSing, you know what I mean? It can be really frustrating. I experienced that when I was pregnant with my first child. I was in a marriage and I was having marital problems. And in Africa, culturally, when you've got marital problems, the first people you consult are your family members. And when I raised those issues, everybody was saying, you're just pregnant, it's just hormones, you'll be fine. And I really had valid issues that I wanted to address at that point. And I ended up very depressed because no one was willing to listen to me and give me an ear. And there's nothing as frustrating as that. Yeah.
Next question.
I think it's important to address every woman's mental health issues differently because everybody experiences it differently. Everyone has a different story. Everyone has different experiences, and women are very different from men. They react to things differently. They experience things differently. They respond to trauma, abuse, mental illnesses differently. Women are more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety or depression, while men tend toward substance abuse or antisocial disorders. And that's according to a new study published by the American Psychological Association. The researchers also found, I did a little research, that women with anxiety disorders are more likely to internalize emotions, which typically results in withdrawal, loneliness, and depression. And men, on the other hand, are more likely to externalize emotions, which leads to aggressive, impulsive, coercive, and non-compliant behavior, according to the study. And these different responses or ways of coping can be especially triggering to women, and even more so when a woman's trauma involves those responses from men, which could be detrimental if treatment occurs like both in the same setting.
I think that's a really good point, to be able to differentiate how genders could manifest certain symptoms, or how mental illness or mental health issues can manifest, because it can be different. Like you said, women tend to internalize compared to men who externalize that. Yeah. So, what do you think are risk factors that can influence women's mental health? And I know we've kind of labeled a few earlier on. So, what other risk factors would you say influence women's mental health?
I know we spoke on hormonal. I think peer pressure is really big, and social media, right? So the influence of me, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, or television, what is being portrayed as, good and fit and beautiful versus what's not, in the different trends that happens weekly, sometimes even daily. What could be in today can definitely not be in tomorrow by the end of the month. So I think that has a huge part into it. And then I think family is a big, so often I know before I became in the environment that I worked in, certain things that my family would tell me, I think, that's normal, until I see other people or my clients that I work with, that they struggle with stuff like that, especially when it comes to like eating disorder, right? I come from a family where they're going to talk about if you're looking too big or if you're gaining too much weight. But when you work with kids that have eating disorder, you have to be very careful. So I had to be mindful of like what I thought was normal about talking about my weight and talking about how much I'm eating is not normal to other people, and how that actually affected me and how I internalized different things, or how I fixed my brain not to eat too much because, what if I am picking on these pounds? So I think those type of things all play in a huge barrier.
I would also say expectations that kind of tie into like a lot of the media as well as like family expectations that you have, and almost pressure, right? That these expectations of being a certain type of way or being a certain type of woman, right? Or being a certain type of family caretaker, whoever, it definitely builds a pressure that can contribute to many women's mental health factors of if I'm not this type of person, or if I can't meet this sort of standard that even you might put on yourself because of society and media or your family, it definitely can create and put more pressure on you and your mental health and your state of being.
I also think that women are economically challenged. Currently in South Africa, over 30% of women are unemployed. And we know that a lot of women choose to stay in abusive relationships because they're not able to maintain a certain lifestyle. So they rather put their mental health at risk and stay where they're being abused instead of leaving because they're unable to fend for themselves and their families. So I really believe that being financial dependent on another person is a very high risk when it comes to mental health.
I also think that our really traumatic life experiences influence mental health a lot, as well as genetic predisposition and failure to learn proper coping skills like earlier in life. We're not taught that. And I agree with what everyone else said as well. Social media, peer pressure, all of those things, family dynamics, they all make a difference in our mental health.
So, with all of those risk factors that we just talked about, what do you think are some protective factors that can help prevent the development of mental health issues among women?
I like to counter argue, I guess. Oh, sorry, Lindsay.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say, I think it's more acceptable for women to discuss their feelings or discuss depression or anxiety compared to male with the hypermasculinity. So I do think that that's a protective factor. I think it's more acceptable for women to express themselves or their feelings and get help. I think they're more likely to, like I've read a study that women are more likely to discuss that they're depressed or anxious to their friends compared to males. So I do think that is a protective factor for women, that in a lot of societies or a lot of cultures, it is more acceptable for women to discuss mental health issues, but not all.
Dominique, what were you going to say about your counter argument?
I was gonna say everything that I've mentioned, that can be negative can also be a positive, because I know with now we're in the rise of discussing mental health, and now we're seeing so many therapists and people activate be an advocate on social media. I believe that can also be positive, right? We seeing all these negative things on social media, but then it counter argues with all these positive, and how to address some of the issues that you may be feeling. What are some signs that you may be feeling? There's so many just good accounts that if you're following, can help you with some of the tools of how to be more engaged in adaptive coping skills and how to assert more boundaries and things like that. And I think when you're able to discuss these things with your family or friends, as Lindsay say, then you can be able to create a better environment for you. So being able to talk to your friends like, hey, these are some of my triggers. Okay, let's work up on those. And maybe you don't trigger me, or even talking to your family. These are some of my triggers. These are some things that I'm dealing with. And then they can help you with those type of things too.
I think also awareness and community really makes a difference. I know that I firmly believe in mentorship and one-on-one mentoring. I know when I started getting mentorship, it really made a huge difference in my life. And when I started getting therapy, it made a huge difference in my life. But I think that if it was talked more about in schools, in churches, just in the world, I think if we were more aware of it and we built a community of people who backed each other up, I think that would be really good protective factors. And I think it'll make, people will isolate less. And I think the numbers could go down for suicide risk and things like that. So.
Okay. So this next question is directed more towards Peyton, but everyone is welcome to add on to it. Just because her organization focuses on sex trafficking and homelessness among women, um, what mental health issues do you see most often being the main battles for these women? And for the others who are in the field as well, please feel free to chime in based on your experience.
So, untreated schizophrenia and substance abuse is prevalent in the homeless communities. But we also commonly see different types of mental health issues, such as like bipolar disorder, personality disorders, major depressive disorders, and anxiety disorders.
I think she definitely covered everything that you would see typically among, especially in homeless women, you know, substance use, schizophrenia, and, you know, with substance use, it affects your brain, so, or the development of your brain. So, of course, naturally, it could lead to um, psychotic breaks, schizophrenia, bipolar, and if they do have it previously before using any substances, you know, those mental health issues could be exacerbated. And of course, you know, because of their situation, they might have um, less accessibility to treatment, or, you know, they're not at a place where they know what's going on, or even aware that they have these mental health issues or that they need to work on these problems. So that's also another barrier in terms of um, dealing with untreated mental illness, and especially if it's stigmatized as well. So for the next question, this is for Mumsy, Dominique, and Jocelyn. As women from a minority background, and this could include race, immigration, religion, sexuality, and gender. Do you think that there are additional challenges for women with your background?
Extremely. I think just the idea of mental health is still being discussed. So it's still like this unknown world in our world, or maybe I'm just talking about in the African American world, but it's still something that we should be heavily relying on religion instead of discussing some of the barriers. Like, it's funny, my mom literally sent me like a devotion this morning that discussed, like, if you engaged more in church, then, you know, your depression will decrease by 90%. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, for sure. But it's like, what about the, you know, the genetic disposition, or what about the childhood trauma? What about the triggers? Like, yes, I can lean on God, but these are still some barriers that I'm definitely going to be facing, or women of color are still going to be facing, or women in general are still going to be facing, no matter what coping skills we have. So I think it's really dealing with the ideology of what mental health is and what contributes to it, because it's oftentimes like just older generation do not know and still are so unaware. And I'm not sure if it's because they're not gleaning to wanting to know, like, that's you guys, I'm just going to step back, or maybe it's a hard concept for them to wrap their head around. I'm not sure, but I think that's one of the huge issues that's going on.
It's there's you can definitely say there are a lot more barriers for women who are counted as minorities, right? Whether that's based off of your sexual identity, um, ethnicities, cultures, right? In like Latinx homes, um, mental health is super stigmatized, and often um, it's just like, well, maybe you're just working too hard, or you need just a break real quick. And I've had to really push around like some family members, including my parents, for like younger in generations, right? Watching my younger siblings or younger cousins kind of going through things that I was going through. And I wasn't going to put up with the fact that they couldn't get access to things because older generations aren't seeing it the same way. There, it's the mentality of like, I went through harder, so you have it easy, kind of a thing. And it's like you're not putting into consideration all the other traumas that we've had, though, even if we had it slightly better than you. And I mean, again, I understand that your trauma was like something that you're trying to brush off, but I'm not gonna let that kind of bypass for a younger generation for myself. Um, and even being that person who's, you know, being more engaged with mental health and trying to destigmatize it in even in just your own family setting, that's like a pretty big like barrier to get through in and of itself, to be that type of person for younger generations and kind of try to break that cycle already. That definitely is something that you have to work through, can be alienating, but if you get a community who's kind of going through certain similar situations, it's a lot easier to work through.
Speaking from an African background, you know, definitely women from minority groups have additional challenges. As an African woman, as an example, you know, divorce is definitely frowned upon. So if you go through with divorce, chances are that your family is going to alienate you. And for those women who are brave enough to eventually decide to, you know, go through with it, obviously suffer from mental health issues because now you don't even have a support structure. And who normally remains with the kids after divorce? It's mostly women. And you can just imagine the burden of having to deal with so much all by yourself. So I definitely believe that culture and religion, you know, is one factor that, you know, gives women the burden of having to suffer from, to being prone to suffering from mental health issues.
And in addition to what we were talking about in terms of, you know, women from a minority background, and that of course includes sexuality, sexual orientation, gender orientation. In today's age, what does being a woman mean?
Well, I think in today's age, being a woman means being able to stand on your own and fight for your, you know, for your rights as a woman. In the olden days, women were meant to stay home and take care of the family while the man goes out to work, and that's exactly a breeding ground for mental health illnesses. That's a breeding ground for depression and all these other, you know, mental health illnesses, I can name them. So right now, women are able to wake up and go work for themselves and their families and their children. So we don't need to tolerate any form of abuse from men because we have the capacity. One thing that I need to mention is that even in the olden days, girls were never taken to school. It was men who would, you know, get an education because they believed that men were the ones who were supposed to take care of their families. But now women are able to go to school and study and, you know, be independent. So for me as a woman today, I'm a living example of that. I'm a single woman who's leading a household with 2 children independently. So for me, that's what a woman is in today's world.
I think being a woman is definitely different per woman, per individual. And it's, for me in that sense, it's kind of respecting a matriarchy of women who have come before me, right? And understanding the tools that they've had to use and the tools that I'm now able to use to kind of get through our day-to-day lives as well as our mental health. And embodying the matriarchy that has come before me, to move ahead. And like, again, we go back to like generational traumas and generational curses and kind of breaking those down, empowering through, and accepting womanhood through aspects of my life that have given like a negative effect, and making those more positive outcomes.
Okay. So our next question, how should society adjust or restructure in order to better support the mental health of women independent of their background?
I believe women need to take a stand and create very clear boundaries, then society will react and respect us better when we take a stand and put a stop to being treated unfairly in the workplaces, at home. We need to set very clear boundaries. That's the only way that society can treat us differently. If we don't fight for our rights, if we don't fight for our mental health, nobody will do it for us. That's my view.
I think that was said perfectly, because with everything that's going on and so many people are making choices for us, I think it's important that we make that stand and create those boundaries. And then we have women in power actually speak upon those and actually stop those things, and we come together, we can definitely make a change, because it's a lot going on right now.
I've said it before, but raising more awareness and also access, I think, is huge. I think getting more help financially to the mental health world would make a huge difference as well. Because I know for me, it was really financially hard to finally get help, because it's really expensive to get mental health help. It is so expensive. I've been through, inpatient centers in hospitals. I've been through residential treatment, and it's like medical bills for days and days and days. And it's impossible to get help with that. And I think that there needs to be something set up. And I think that comes with, having people in power to say something, standing up, like you guys said, and really fighting for what we need. I definitely agree with both of those. But yeah, I think awareness and access is huge.
And so, for all of you who are successful and powerful women helping raise awareness about mental health issues, what advice or suggestions do you have, not only for women, but others in general?
The biggest advice I can get is definitely finding community. I think community with like-minded individuals, with people who make you feel seen for who you are, all of your identities, all of the hats that you wear, all of your who can see you wholly and accept you for the person you are in all different facets of your life. Finding a community like that, even if it's just 1 to 2 different people, is a really great start that can help with mental health for sure. Since access is so limiting, right, for certain individuals, or it takes like really big crisis for some individuals to even get access. If you can find a community that can even help you out in your situations when you're going through minor crises, that's a really big way to kind of build yourself up from there and allow yourself to find alternatives if that's needed to the access for your mental health.
I also think, educating yourself is very critical. Knowledge is power. You cannot be defeated, but by what you know. If you suffer from depression, for instance, you will seek the right mental health care. You'll take the right medication. You'll avoid your triggers. So it's very important for people to educate themselves about mental health care. That's really the best way to defeat it. I remember for the first time when I had a panic attack, I was so frightened. I didn't know what it was. I thought I was going to die. I didn't even want to go to bed at night because I was so scared that it will happen again. But once I found out what it was, I knew what to avoid. I knew the type of foods to avoid. To this day, I don't drink coffee because I know caffeine will trigger, a panic attack, chocolates and all these things. So knowledge is really, really, really powerful. So yeah.
I also think that getting help is really important. And I know I've stressed that a lot, but it really made a difference for me in my personal walk with mental illness. Getting help was the best thing I ever did. And I think that, also finding, like she said, community, safe place, safe people who you can trust, who you can talk to, who you can be vulnerable with about your struggles. I think that also can help. And, you know, we are in the world of internet. And, you know, if you look on the internet, there is actually so much access to so many resources that can help us. I was actually on there today looking up resources that I can use in my own personal nonprofit to help others, because we are big on mentoring. And so I was actually looking up resources today, and I was like, wow, there's so much out there now. Like, there truly is. There's YouTube, and then there's Google, you know, and you can find so much out there. And I think that you know, getting help, whatever that looks like, whether that's inpatient treatment, whether that's you know, if you're super suicidal and you have a plan, you can go to the emergency room and you can tell them, and they have to admit you, and they have to put you in like an inpatient psych ward in order to help you with your mental health until you're stable enough to go home. Like, they have to take care of you, because they would be held accountable if you left and you killed yourself. And so I think that those things are just so important. And I think we have access also to bookstores even. And there's so many resources even in bookstores on mental health. And, you know, you can buy books on depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, like all sorts of stuff. And you can find CBT books, DBT books, like all of those things, and they're all good resources. And, you know, we have a lot more access than we used to. And I think that we should really use it, and it would make a real big difference.
So, why do you believe that mental health concerns in women are often overlooked or dismissed?
I think it goes to just women looking beneath men in general. And I think once we address that first, we can go on to other issues. Because it's like in so many different aspects, even in 2021 or 2022, we're still looked as, you know, beneath a man. We can't have equal pay. We have to have a man determine our, you know, reproduction, whether it's having birth control and abortion and things like that. So we're still fighting for these things in 2022. So unfortunately, it's like another thing to add on to the list, that mental health is not a priority when it comes to women, because, you know, we are beneath. So, and it's sad because we juggle so much, like as some of the panelists mentioned, like we have to bear children and all the various emotions that come with that, be the soul of the household, right? Who's else is cooking and cleaning and making sure the children are fed, and still have to look the part and make sure we feel attractive or just feel like ourselves as a human being. So we go through so much, but we're still looked as beneath men. So I think if we can just become kind of like a level or even a step up, because we deal more than what a man deals with on a day-to-day basis or month-to-month basis. So we can make that step up, and then we can move steps into discussing our mental health.
I think there's definitely this idea that women so we then, the idea of like us not being able to handle a lot or what we're expected to handle is definitely part of a barrier that adds to that, because it's like, well, this is something that most or all women are supposed to deal with, right? Or this is something that all women do, and it's like, well, no, that's not necessarily true, and not all women go through the same situations or having the same experiences. So you can't say that this is an expectation put on women across the board, because that's not true.
I think also that there's people that still don't take it seriously, and then there's people who don't believe that mental illness is real. And there's people who view it as a weakness and not a disease. And it forces people to shove it down, ignore it, and fake a smile. And so I think, you know, I mean, the stigma just, it has to be broken. I think that is so important, and it drives me nuts because I've come in so many situations where, even in my own family, where people, they don't believe that it's real and they don't understand it. And because they don't understand it, they don't believe in it. And it's like, just because you're ignorant to it doesn't mean that it's not real, and doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It still exists. It's a real thing, so it really gets under my skin when people try to say that it's not real and it's not a disease, and just get over it and just push through and just put on a happy face and just be happy. And I'm like, that's not how that works. Like, or you shouldn't be taking so much medication. And it's like, okay, but this is what's helping me. This is what's helping me stay alive. Like, I get that all the time. Like, you should get off all of that medication. You shouldn't be on medication. And I'm like, you want me on medication. I promise you.
And so, with that said, what are some things we can do on a professional or a personal level to remediate this issue that mental health concerns among women are overlooked and dismissed?
Well, I believe that as professionals, we need to assist in protecting women's rights. We have to engage in mental health awareness programs within the workplace, within the communities, so that people are aware of what mental health is. I agree with Peyton. Last week I was talking about the fact that it's still baffles me that people can take their blood pressure medication in public and there's no problem with that, or their diabetes medication in public. But if I were to take out antidepressants in public and drink them, I will then be stigmatized and called all sorts of names, that I'm crazy, I'm unstable, and so forth. So people are not even free to take medication because they're scared of being judged. So as mental health practitioners, we really need to take a stand and educate people about mental health.
I think also, kind of like I said earlier about being vulnerable, I think more people like sharing their story and sharing their experiences with mental health would really make a difference, because it would raise more awareness. And it also would help other people out there who are struggling to not feel so alone, and to feel like they have, a community, or, someone out there who is like them, who is similar to them. And so I just think that awareness and sharing our story and being vulnerable about what we're going through and what we're struggling with, and maybe even our diagnosis is, I'm a big advocate on being vulnerable and sharing your story and the power in that, because we have power in our stories, because we are overcomers, and we have fought and we have fought and we have fought, especially as women. And I just think that that's so important.
And I think being both a professional and on a personal level, being able to provide that safe space for people to share those stories, be able to speak up, because if we don't talk about it, then it's like we're denying that these things exist, and it's like dismissing what other people are feeling, thinking. And if we don't you know make it more like a normal conversation. It should be a normal conversation. It shouldn't be something that you should feel ashamed of, embarrassed about, or feel like, you're going to be guilt tripped. It should feel like a normal daily conversation where people check in on you, see how you're feeling, because it is important. It's an important topic, just like how we talk about physical diseases, it's just as important to talk about mental health. And so, with the last question, as we talked about different mental health issues that women go through and barriers that women go through in terms of possibly seeking help or even just getting the knowledge or being aware of mental health issues, what are some resources available to women that they can use as either like an informative guide or for actual support?
As I've already said, I think it's important for women to educate themselves about mental health issues. However, I also realized that, getting access to mental health is very expensive. It's not everyone that can afford to see a therapist. It's very costly, like Peyton has already said. So at least we have, the internet where we can search for information if you're not sure about something. I really think that that's really, really critical. Also, I do yoga every Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we also need to find other spaces where we can just, meditate and listen to our bodies and just give time to ourselves, because we are so overwhelmed with so many things around us. Like I've already said, we have so many responsibilities on our shoulders. So it's very important to take care of ourselves in any way possible. If meeting with a friend for coffee makes you happy, do that. Do whatever that makes you feel good. Yeah, that's my last message.
Definitely going off like what everybody's been saying, using social media as that tool, it can, if you put yourself in certain spaces, it can become negative, but finding the right individuals to follow, right, whether that's mental health workers themselves or even groups that have the capability to meet in real life, using social media that way, right, to kind of assist on your mental health journey can be really beneficial for people who lack access. If you of course, that's if you have internet access, but then there's tons of community, I feel like, engagement programs that a lot of people also aren't aware of. So even checking your local library is a great resource, because I do that pretty often in the LA County, and they have libraries tend to have a lot of good resources, including for mental health. So I think just kind of reaching out to your local library is also a good way to kind of get yourself some access to mental health that might be within your range or even free for assistance and stuff like that.
I'd like to add, like, just being in local contact with some of your mental health practices in your community. Like I know some of the practices that I know, they do free sound bath or free tea sipping, and in groups they do yoga. So I think just being able to know where some of these resources are and some of these free events where you can have these moments. I know they did a cleansing that I went to a couple of weeks ago for Indigenous in mental health, and they had just so many various things that you can get for free. So it's just knowing where your resources are and tapping in. You can use social media. Therapy for Black women is as good resources where you can figure out different things and movements that are going on in your community. And with everything that's going on, a lot of people are doing pro bono services or reduced charge. So I think it's sometimes you might have to sacrifice to, seek that help. But I mean, hey, we're ladies, if we can get our hair done, nails done, and lashes, what is $30, if you're getting it once a month, the therapy session, just try to make that sacrifice to do the work. Once you do that groundwork and put your first foot down, it will be a wonderful process that you'll go through, just once you get out of the scaredness.
Going off of that, I think that so you can ask the therapist, like, do they have sliding scale? And some of them do, and you can search and find therapists who have sliding scale or who go with your insurance, or if you don't have insurance, will they let you do a payment plan? Just tell them your situation. People have a heart, especially if you're a therapist. Like, you have a heart and you have a passion to help people. And so just simply asking can sometimes make a world of difference. I know I was seeing a therapist in a church for 2 or 3 years, and financially I could barely afford food. And so I definitely couldn't afford therapy. And because she knew my situation, she didn't charge me anything at all. And so I got free therapy for 2 to 3 years. And I was also going to say, I know I said internet books, things like that. I don't know if you guys have heard of Dr. Caroline Leaf, but she writes a lot of books, and a lot of it is on mental health. She's really big on studying the trauma in the brain and how it affects, and how mental health affects the brain and all of the things. I love her. And I think that her teachings are amazing. I follow her on Instagram. I love her posts. I share her posts all the time. She is a really good resource as well. And you can even, like, if you can't afford to go to like Barnes and Noble or Books a Million to get some kind of book, you can find, like, my husband has a website that he uses that he can find cheap books, like books that you can find in Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, or whatever. You can find like $2 books on there. And so just looking online at different resources, different websites, and finding like cheap books, even like if you can't afford regular price books, because I know we can't. So he goes on his little website and he finds like the book that I want to get, but he finds it for like $2 to $3 with like free shipping or whatever. And it's really cool. So there's definitely a lot of things out there. More than I knew back in the day. It's definitely, I'm glad that people are talking about it more, but I definitely think more awareness needs to happen for sure.
And I also put down, and everyone else is putting in some resources there. So definitely check those out. I added pdfdrive.com. It's helpful for counselors, mental health professionals in general, because you can download therapy treatment planners, which are expensive, on Amazon. So they have a lot of free books. I know Your Body Keeps the Score is on there. So that's a very good read. Running on Empty, I believe, might be on there as well. So they have a lot of, it's not only for mental health professionals, but they have a lot of self-help books as well. So definitely check those out. But if we have any more questions from the audience, we have a few minutes.
Oh, sorry. I also forgot to mention that I have a YouTube channel called Coming Out Unscathed. Please support. It's on gender-based violence awareness. So that's another resource that people can use.
And I actually spoke on like one episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
I was also going to add that if you can look up different coping mechanisms. And it can be as simple as like taking a bubble bath, going for a walk, or taking, like, when you're having those panic attacks, when you're having those depressive moods, taking yourself out of the situation or out of the place where you're at and going somewhere different can make a huge difference. I know for me, it makes a huge difference for me to just even get out of the house and go to Walmart. You know what I mean? When I because I get really crippling anxiety and I won't go anywhere for like weeks. And my husband, he forces me to get out of the house. So he'll give me things to do to like, and also I have a puppy now that I got for an emotional support animal. And so I have to take care of her. So I do have to get out of the house with her a little bit, so that helps as well. But finding different coping mechanisms, painting, going to, now they have like the selfie studios where you can go and take cute fun pictures and going shopping, and just even if it's just window shopping. Like that's something I just like going through the stores and just looking at everything, acting like I can buy it all, but I really can't. I know that really helps me a lot. And also just like sometimes just like reading a good book and drinking coffee. I mean, it can be like really simple things that can really help you.
I was muted. I said, yeah, definitely. Um, so anyone else want to add anything before we end? No? All right. So I do want to thank all our panelists for being here. Thank you very much. You provided a lot of information. Thank you for sharing your experiences. And I hope that everyone who joined in found this panel informative and useful. We do plan to upload this on our website, so it's available for people who weren't able to join us today. But if you would like to get in touch with any of our panelists, feel free to ask us and we can give you their social media or their website. And also, their information is provided on our program agenda. But for the panel discussion, that concludes it. Again, thank you everyone for joining in on a Saturday. I know you have some things to do, especially Mumsy. It's 11 p.m. there. So I hope you have a very good night.
It's actually midnight.
Oh, midnight. Oh my gosh. Okay. Our next event is at 3:15. It will be an art session. So it's a nice way to kind of end the full day event. If you'd like to stay on and kind of join that, you're more than welcome to do so. But we'll take a 15-minute break and then we'll start at 3:15.